My name is Nicholas. My life has recently come to a point where my wife, Tiffany, and I have decided to start over. It wasn't an easy decision, but it was a necessary one, and to be honest, I saw great promise in it. We moved to a new city, unfamiliar, and a little scary at first glance, but I have always believed that in order to succeed, sometimes you have to leave your comfort zone. The reason for this move was my new job. My previous company, where I had worked for several years, was experiencing serious financial difficulties. The management could not guarantee a stable future, and I realized that it was time to look for something better. Luckily, I had a great opportunity, a position with career growth prospects in a large, fast-growing company. It was a chance I couldn't pass up, because it could provide Tiffany and I with the stability we had always dreamed of. Tiffany did not immediately agree to the move. She was very attached to our old house, our neighbors, and of course, our way of life. However, after long conversations and many arguments, she realized that this decision could be beneficial for both of us. We left our old lives, friends and memories behind to start a new chapter in our life together. When we moved, we bought a house in a new neighborhood, which was quite nice, although unknown to us. It wasn't very big, but it was cozy and, most importantly, affordable. Buying a house was a huge step for us, and to be honest, the loan we took out for it was a little scary. However, I was confident that with my new job, I would be able to quickly pay off this debt and provide us with a quiet life. My goal was clear. I wanted to close this loan as soon as possible so that I would not depend on banks and not think about the next payment every month. It became a kind of mission for me, and I decided to make every effort to make it happen. However, the work required a lot of time and energy. I often stayed in the office late, trying to do my best, because I realized that this was the only way I could advance in my career and achieve what I had planned. Meanwhile, Tiffany was busy setting up our new home. She was a great hostess and always knew how to create comfort in any corner. Although we hadn't yet made any new friends, she was enthusiastic about doing the housework, trying to make our home as comfortable as possible. I believed that we had a better future ahead of us, that this move was the beginning of a new, more successful stage in our lives. However, sometimes I noticed that Tiffany looked a little pensive and maybe a little sad. I consoled myself with the thought that this was just temporary nostalgia for the old house, and that she would eventually get used to the new place. But somewhere deep down I felt that something was wrong. Our new house quickly became our home, and we gradually finished the renovation inside. Afterwards, we made a cozy yard where we spent happy sunny days. I was very happy that I was able to create family happiness. But everything comes at a price, and I had to pay sometimes. Every day I worked harder and harder at my job without noticing it. My work was hard, but I did my best, and I started to grow in my career. The company I worked for built private houses, and I started as a simple worker, and 6 months later I became a foreman. My team was engaged in business trips to build houses in other cities. Frequent and long business trips began to destroy my family. My wife was not happy to be alone at home for a week, and sometimes a month. Our relationship began to grow cold. But I did not take this into account. Despite all this, I continued to work, putting all my energy into my career, because I wanted to provide us with a better life. I believed that our sacrifices would pay off, and we would finally be able to relax and enjoy the fruits of our efforts. But how wrong I was. One evening, when Tiffany and I were sitting at dinner, she brought up a topic that surprised me a bit. Calmly, smiling slightly, she said that she wanted to get a job. I immediately noticed a note of determination in her voice, something that had not been present before when it came to employment. Tiffany explained that she was very bored sitting at home alone, especially when I was away on another business trip. She added that a job would give her the opportunity to socialize more with other people, and it would allow her not to feel lonely when I am away for weeks at a time. It took me a while to find something to say. I had two feelings. On the one hand, I realized that it was really hard to be alone at home when there were only empty rooms around, and the only company was the TV or a book. I spent most of my time at work, and if I wasn't on a business trip, I would come home late, exhausted after a long day at work. Tiffany was alone, and I realized that this could be depressing for her. The woman who had always been active and energetic was now locked in four walls, deprived of the opportunity to develop and feel needed. On the other hand, I was a little worried about the idea that she was going to work when I was already earning enough for us to live comfortably. My salary allowed us to even pay off the house loan faster than we had originally planned. Everything was going well, and we were getting closer to our main goal every month to close the loan and start planning a family, to have children. It was what we both dreamed of from the very beginning. I imagined how our lives would become easier when we paid off the loan in full, and this burden would no longer hang over us. After a few minutes of thinking, I agreed. After all, I didn't see anything wrong with it, and I couldn't even think that this job would be the beginning of the end of our life together. I told myself that it was the right decision, that she deserved to feel happy and satisfied. Besides, I wanted to be a support for my wife. I wanted her to know that I was always on her side. Tiffany seemed to breathe a sigh of relief when she heard my agreement. She thanked me and said she had already found the place she was interested in. It was a veterinary clinic not far from our house. She told me that she had long dreamed of working in this field, and now she had finally decided to make her dream come true. Tiffany had studied to become a veterinarian, but due to various circumstances, she never started working in her specialty. Now it seemed that fate had given her a second chance. I could see her eyes light up when she talked about her new opportunity. It was something that really inspired her, and I couldn't be against it. I even started to believe that this job would make her happier and our lives more harmonious. Every morning, Tiffany would go to the clinic to help the vets take care of the animals, and when she returned home, she always had many stories to tell about her new charges. Her enthusiasm and love for this work was obvious. I was happy to see that she had finally found something that she enjoyed. At first glance, her job seemed innocent, but it was the one that would drive us apart and turn our lives upside down. After Tiffany started working, I decided it was time to take care of the additional security of our home. I still didn't feel completely at ease in the new city, especially since we were both out of the house most of the time. I decided to install a modern alarm system that allowed me to control it via my smartphone. It seemed extremely convenient. We could check at any time to make sure we hadn't forgotten to turn it on, or turn it off remotely if we needed to. The alarm system quickly became a part of our everyday life. I felt more at ease knowing that our home was protected, especially when I was away on business trips. Tiffany was happy too, because now we could both monitor the situation even when we were away from home. It was only a week after Tiffany started working, and I noticed how she literally blossomed. Her mood improved. She became the cheerful woman I had always known. Every evening she came home with new stories about work, her eyes shining, and I was happy to see that this decision really brought her joy. "This is good for us," I thought as I was getting ready for my next business trip. Finally, it seemed to me that everything was going well. This time I was sent to another city for 2 weeks. The work was intense, but I was already used to such trips. We were constantly busy, and it left no time for unnecessary thoughts. However, one day, in the late afternoon, I accidentally noticed a notification on my phone. The alarm in our house went off much later than usual. This surprised me, because Tiffany used to come home at the same time, and here it turned out that she was late. I didn't think much of it, but I decided to ask her about it during our conversation in the evening. When I asked her why she turned off the alarm late, Tiffany didn't seem confused. She explained that she had stayed late at work because she was trying to fit in. She said she wanted to show her willingness to work overtime so that her colleagues would appreciate her efforts more. Her words seemed quite logical to me. I went through this myself at the beginning of my career. I worked late to show my commitment. I understood her and decided that there was no reason to worry. However, during one of our breaks at work, I shared this observation with a colleague. He was a senior employee with whom I often worked together on business trips. I told him about how Tiffany had started to stay late at work and about the alarm incident. I didn't expect any particular reaction from him, but he was alert. His words were simple, but they left me feeling uneasy. "Nicholas, you and I are often on business trips, and you need to be more attentive to what is happening at home. Sometimes things are not as they seem at first glance." His remark took me by surprise. Until that moment, I hadn't even thought about the possibility that something could be wrong. I trusted Tiffany. We were always open with each other. But after that conversation, doubts began to creep into my head. I tried to push them away, telling myself that it was just an unjustified fear, but the seeds of suspicion had already been sown. I decided not to jump to conclusions and continued my work, but the thoughts that something might be wrong began to bother me more and more. I tried to calm myself down, but subconsciously I already felt that I needed to be more careful. After I returned from my last business trip, I had a clear feeling that I needed to spend more time with Tiffany. I had been traveling a lot lately, and it was felt in our relationship. Perhaps it was just my fears, but I felt that we needed to reconnect, which was so lacking due to my constant absence. So I approached my boss and told him that I needed to take a week off to be home and spend time with my family. My boss agreed, and I was happy to be able to spend this time with Tiffany. This week turned out to be a real breath of fresh air for both of us. We spent time together again like we used to, walking in the park, going to the movies, cooking dinner together, and just enjoying each other's company. It seemed to me that our relationship had been revived, that we were in love again, as we used to be. It lifted my spirits, and I even began to think that all those suspicions and doubts that tormented me were in vain. But my friend's words never left my mind. He had warned me to be vigilant, and although I wanted to forget about it, there was a feeling of anxiety inside. So I decided to take additional measures. It looked like a simple and innocent gift, a keychain with a built-in GPS tracker. I decided to give it to Tiffany, emphasizing that it would help her not to lose her keys. She accepted the gift without any suspicion because she always had her house keys with her. For me, it gave me the opportunity to see where she was when I wasn't around. This step seemed mean to me, but I reassured myself that it was necessary for my own peace of mind. I just wanted to make sure that all those bad thoughts that my coworker had given me were just imaginations, nothing more. In my heart, I hoped that the tracker would disprove my anxiety, and I could live again without any doubts. A week passed. I was on a business trip again, and everything seemed to be as usual. But one evening, while reviewing the alarm data, I noticed something strange. The alarm in our house was still on, even though Tiffany should have been home long ago. According to her usual schedule, she should have come back and turned it off hours ago. This surprised me, and I decided to check the GPS tracker data to see where she was now. And then I got an uneasy feeling. The tracker showed that she was not at work. Instead, she was at a restaurant on the outskirts of our city. I was confused. Why was she there? What was she doing in this place when she should have been at work or home? Excited, I decided to call her to hear what she had to say. I asked her if everything was okay, noting that it was quite late and she was still not home. I tried to sound calm without showing that I knew where she really was. Tiffany answered, but there was something unusual in her voice, as if she didn't fully believe her own words. "I got held up at work. Don't worry, everything's fine," she said, but I noticed an uncertainty in her voice that I had never heard before. It was like being hit over the head with those words. I sat there with the phone in my hand, not knowing how to react to what I had just heard. Emotions were raging inside me. Confusion, anger, pain, and uncertainty merged into one chaos. Why is she deceiving me? What is going on here? And most importantly, what should I do now? I had no answers to these questions. The only thing I knew for sure was that I had to do something. But what exactly? I realized that I did not know the whole truth, but my heart told me that something was wrong. And although I was not yet ready to face reality, I could no longer ignore what was happening. The next day, my phone rang, and an unknown number appeared on the screen. I picked up the phone, and a woman's voice asked me on the other end, "Is this Nicholas?" "Yes," I answered, still trying to guess who it could be. It turned out to be Jessica, the wife of the vet with whom Tiffany worked. She seemed alarmed and got straight to the point. "I suspect that my husband and your wife are having an affair." And her words penetrated my mind like cold ice. She suggested that we meet after I returned from my business trip to talk about it in person. I tried to convince her that it was just a misunderstanding, that it couldn't be. But something broke inside me. My voice lacked confidence, as the thoughts that had been tormenting me lately returned with renewed vigor. The doubts that I had tried to dismiss were now becoming more and more real. I remembered the night when Tiffany said she was working late, but was actually at a restaurant. It became clear to me that my fears were beginning to be confirmed. For days later, I returned home, but decided not to tell Tiffany. I told her that I would be staying 2 more days because I didn't have time to finish my work. I wanted to see everything with my own eyes before drawing any conclusions. Jessica and I agreed to meet near the clinic where our partners worked. By then she was already pregnant, her belly was noticeably rounded, and I thought she must be in her 7th or 8th month. I felt indignant as I imagined her husband cheating on her in that state. What a hypocrite he is, I thought to myself, to cheat on his wife, who is about to give birth to his child. It struck me so hard that I forgot about my own suspicions about Tiffany for a moment. I sat with Sarah in a rented car, not far from the clinic, preparing for what might happen. Anxiety filled every minute of the wait. And suddenly she brought me out of my thoughts. "There they are!" I looked in that direction and saw Tiffany and her colleague leaving the building together and getting into a car. We decided to follow them. They drove to the same restaurant where I had already suspected something was wrong. Sarah and I stayed in the car, watching them through the restaurant windows. Their dinner didn't look like a meeting of colleagues at all. Their looks, their gestures, everything gave them away as a couple in love. The pain inside me was growing, but I tried to stay focused to see how far they would go. When they left the restaurant, we started following them again from a distance using the GPS. They were driving to a country lake, and that surprised me even more. When they arrived there, they parked right by the shore. We stopped nearby so they wouldn't suspect anything. They didn't get out of the car, but after a few minutes, I noticed their car started to sway. Jessica was the first to break down. She ran out of the car and ran to their car. I followed her, trying to stay calm, even though everything was boiling inside me. She abruptly opened the door, and we saw a picture that was hard to imagine. Tiffany and Sarah's husband were half naked, caught up in a process that left no room for doubt. Tiffany froze in shock when she saw me. Her face expressed complete confusion as she began to quickly button her clothes, saying something, but I could not hear her words. My feelings overwhelmed me, but most of all I felt an inner emptiness and disappointment. It was the end of our family life, the end of everything I believed in. I told her that tomorrow morning she had to pick up her things from the lawn, because I didn't want her in our house anymore. I forbade her to come home that evening, allowing her and her lover to no longer hide. Let them spend the night together, I thought to myself, feeling my heart breaking but realizing that there was nothing else to do. Analyzing everything that had happened, I began to realize that in this life not everyone is ready to love to the end and be faithful, despite any difficulties. The marriage vows we make to each other, unfortunately, are often forgotten or lose their meaning for those who do not know how to appreciate real relationships. I was not ready for such a betrayal, but it taught me one important truth: loyalty and love are not just words, but a choice that a person must make every day. One thing that comforted me a little in this situation was that we had a prenuptial agreement. Tiffany and I had decided that in the event of infidelity, the betrayer would only keep his or her clothes and personal jewelry, and the betrayed would get everything else. It was supposed to be an incentive not to cheat on each other. And although I never thought that this clause of the contract would become a reality, now it has become a kind of moral compensation for me for the destroyed hopes. That's how, in an instant, you can regret several years of your life when you lose something that seemed so reliable and strong. However, the biggest blow to this newlywed couple was the news that a good friend of Sarah's late father was the owner of the very veterinary clinic where they worked. It was he who helped her husband get a job, and it was through him that Jessica was able to get my phone number. When he found out about their affair, he fired them both without hesitation. But that was only the beginning of their problems. He wrote down such details of their affair on their resumes that they would not be able to get a job at any other clinic. He assured me that they would never find work in this field again, at least in our region. Jessica, against all odds, withstood this blow. She gave birth to a son and is raising him on her own. She filed a lawsuit for alimony to secure her child's future, although I know how hard it is for her now. We no longer communicate, but I hope that she can find peace and happiness in her life, which has now changed so dramatically. As for me, I decided to sell our house. It had become unbearable for me. Every corner reminded me of betrayal and loss. When I considered the options for selling, I felt in my heart that I was finally letting go of the past. Soon I would be promoted at work. I decided that I would no longer go on business trips. It gave me a chance to review my life and think about what to do next. Maybe in time, I will find a new home and try to build a family again. But right now, I want to focus on myself, on my career, and on putting this painful stage of my life behind me. Life goes on, and although the past has left its mark, I know that I can recover and find my happiness. Even if the path to it is long and difficult, I am ready to move forward, remembering that true love and loyalty do not require promises. They must be engraved in the heart.